You are watching Irish Web TV and welcome. This week I have a very special guest in the studio today and I am delighted to meet her, and very big welcome to Anna Kavanagh, activist. Thank you for coming all the way to Cavan today, Anna. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Aine. It's lovely to be here.
Great. You are from Longford, you live in Longford, and a lot of people came to know of you when you came to prominence was back last November when you covered the Strokestown eviction. That's when you came to the fore, doing what you do, bringing the news to the fore.
Yes, and it was something that I was plunged into by accident. I got a phone call on the Thursday after the eviction. The eviction took place on Tuesday, the 11th of December, and on the Thursday I got a phone call from a very concerned neighbour. The eviction had not been covered by mainstream media at all. So I went down and I met with the family, and I suppose at the end of my 3-hour meeting with them, they felt that I was somebody that they could trust. And I went back the following day and I broke the news that this eviction had taken place, and I actually filmed the men. At that stage there were a number of these mercenaries from Northern Ireland occupying the farmhouse, and they were in the yard, and I filmed them and I asked them would...
Of course this was all going out on Facebook.
Yes,
people
Facebook
could
Live.
hardly believe what they were seeing actually, because there was not a mention of it in the mainstream media at all.
That's right. So at that time then I was, and I still do, volunteer with Athlone Community Radio, and they contacted me and they asked me to do a live from the scene of the eviction, and I did that. And while I was doing that live, this man came along, and he, after I had done the radio interview, he told me that he had actually been there the morning of the eviction. His name was Robert Brady, and I asked him could I talk to him, and I did. It went out live. Yes, I sat in his car, and that video went viral. It ended up having almost 750,000 views. It went all over the world.
So that threw the name Anna Kavanagh out there. But
Yes.
let's talk about Anna Kavanagh. Anna, you retired early. You are a teacher by nature. That's
right.
where you're coming from. You taught English, which is very helpful, but you taught English, history and geography, am I right?
Yes.
And you took early retirement, but you always had a grow, and you wanted to get involved in the media, so you did a media course.
Yes, in 2016 I did a course over in Longford with Outtake Community Media, which was run by Shane Crossan, Seamus Clark and Deirdre Byrne, and I suppose that kind of whetted my appetite, and I made a number of documentaries. Now they were all to do with Irish music, and I suppose at that stage it didn't really have anything to do with social media. It had to do with making the documentary and using social media to promote it. The Strokestown eviction actually plunged me straight into the world of social media.
And that's where you have been since.
Yes.
Now let's get talking about social media and actually MSN, mainstream media. There are people out there who would say that mainstream media is not giving us the true story of what is happening in Ireland, in rural Ireland especially. What do you say about that, Anna?
Yes, I would definitely subscribe to the view that mainstream media really is the mouthpiece for the state, and it's easy to understand why that is the case, because government funding actually keeps mainstream media afloat.
You're saying it's very much politically influenced?
Well, yes, and now I have to say that this is my opinion, so I suppose nobody can deny me a right to an opinion, but I believe that, say for example, RTE is government funded, and the senior positions within RTE, I am sure there is a certain amount of political influence in those appointments.
Perhaps that's conjecture on your part.
Yes, well, perhaps, but it is a fact. It is a fact that RTE is state funded. The funding comes through the government.
We are all told how, why and when to pay our 160 fee,
Yes.
and there's a threat that it might be even more than that in coming times.
There is an old saying, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So if the broadcast media is not, I suppose, singing the tune of the government, then their funding in some way is cut.
Okay.
And then I just want to talk about print media.
Which is dying at the moment.
Yes, but if you pick up any newspaper,
They can tell their politics.
well, it's not even that. It's that nowadays the media are almost exclusively dependent on advertising for their survival. And most of that advertising is coming from government departments. So if you pick up any regional newspaper or any of the daily newspapers and look at the advertising, you will see that a considerable portion of that advertising is coming from the state, you know, from government departments. It might be just an advertisement about water restrictions or HSE or something like that.
But that's going to bring me to my next thing, Anna, and that is where a need for people like you has come to the fore, and people like myself who are putting out stuff there that's not hitting the mainstream media. I don't know if do we have an agenda in doing this? I certainly don't. I just put the stories out there and give the people a voice who otherwise may not have a voice, and that is my caption on that. But there are a lot of people now like you coming up possibly with their own agendas as well, and are bringing all this news to the fore. Can't you see that happening?
Yes, I suppose social media is becoming very important now as a vehicle for people to express their points of view and
to get their voice heard.
Yes. Now, I suppose those of you who follow me on social media on Facebook will see that at Easter, for example, there was a family of 9 housed in one room in emergency accommodation in Tullamore in Offaly. They had their electricity and their water cut off. And I contacted the 4 newspapers in Offaly and the local radio station. Nobody would cover that story. But the power of media...
Why is that?
Because it goes back to what I was saying. They couldn't offend the county council because they're depending on the council for advertising revenue. That's what I believe. So that's what I believe.
This is the stories you're getting out. This is why. You also do a lot of work. Sorry for cutting in on you there, but you also do a lot of work with people involved in Tusla.
Yes, and that's very sad. Again,
Tusla should be hitting the mainstream media at the moment, but it's not. There are big, heavy stories out there at the moment.
Well,
I don't know if we can mention them now, but...
Yeah, it's not entirely true to say that the stories with Tusla are not in mainstream media. They are. But the mainstream media are actually reporting on the reports that are coming out from people like the Ombudsman for Children, Niall Muldoon, has been extremely critical of Tusla. We had the UN Raconteur on child sex abuse came to Ireland last year, and her report was actually published, or there was a commentary on her report published in the newspaper. So the in-camera rule in the family law courts means that mainstream media can't report on what's happening in the family law courts. There is a possibility of a fine of €50,000 or a 3-year jail term, or both. So mainstream journalists are really tied in that whole area, and
that's meant to protect. There's a double-edged sword there. Their idea is in protecting the family as well, in doing that and keeping that in-camera rule, isn't it?
Well, the in-camera rule is being used arbitrarily now in the family law courts in a way that it was never meant to be used. So it was meant to protect the identity of families at a time when they were struggling, but now it is actually being used to cover up huge irregularity. What's the word I'm looking for? Yes, irregularities or illegal procedures that are going on in the family law courts. So for example, this week there was one lady found herself in court on her own without legal representation in front of 13 people on the other side, namely gals, barristers, solicitors, social workers and so on. And that was all held in camera.
That's not fair. Yes. Anna, this is the way it's going. This is the way our society is at the moment. Now people ring you and you're nearly as good as Joe Duffy at this stage.
Well, I'm not. No, that's an exaggeration.
No, I don't. I'm just joking. But people are ringing you with their stories, and as I say, they want to get a voice. They give you the story, and you want you to give them a voice. You're doing this duty on your own bat.
Yes, I am. And I suppose the thing that really upsets me greatly is that people contact me, I think, in the mistaken belief that I'm going to be able to sort out their problem. For example, I had the high-profile case recently with the O'Brien family who were homeless, and I was contacted by a number of other people that are homeless and in very precarious living conditions. And the sad thing is that I'm just not in a position to do anything about it.
But I think maybe they know that. They just, your voice to tell, and you can get it out
yes.
there. Just for somebody else to know. And maybe as some of your interviews will make people aware, oh yes, I am in the same boat.
Yes.
And this is what I can do. And
yes.
This is, somebody else is in the same boat. It's just making more people aware, because it's not been in the mainstream media. So you are in effect helping other people.
Well, I suppose when people contact me, for example, I've been contacted recently by a number of grandmothers who have no access to their children. The children are in foster care, and it's a source of huge pain to them. And it's not an issue that I'm able to take on. But what I have actually done in those instances, I have put the grandmothers in touch with each other. So now they can support each other. I have put together a group of women whose children have been taken by TUSLA, and they have formed an organisation called ABC, the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice. And that group is just getting up off the ground now, and I think that there's going to be huge potential with that group to fight for justice for birth mothers whose children have been taken. And I suppose with people who are homeless and in precarious conditions, say for example, travellers contact me that are homeless, and I say to them, you've got to set up a group. You've got to connect with other people in the same position as yourself. And you see, mainstream media won't deal with an individual case unless it is a real hard luck case. But if you form a group, then you are protected within the group, because it's no longer the voice of the individual. It's the voice of the group campaigning on a particular issue. And I suppose another group that of people that have contacted me recently are foster parents. Being contacted by a lot of foster parents who are not supported in their role as foster parents. I know I have highlighted hugely what has happened to mothers whose children have been taken. But the flip side of that is that there are children that needed to be taken into care for their safety. And the foster parents are finding that there are no supports for them, particularly for children with special needs.
So you are in fact helping people, Anna, by giving them the way or telling them to do this. You are in effect helping people. Now, where do you see all this going? Your role now in doing this, you're probably the person now that around this area anyway that I know is doing it. Where do you see all this going? Where is it leading to? How are you going to make a lifestyle, not a lifestyle, but like how are you going to sustain yourself doing this? Where do you see it going, Anna? I know it's a hard question, but where do you see it going?
That is a very difficult question, and you have just given it to me. And I suppose I'm a very truthful, honest person. And I have to tell you the truth. I don't have a plan. Before I get out of bed every day, I say, Lord, thy will be done in my life today. So I feel that I am just part of a plan, a higher plan, and I feel that I suppose that I'm a great believer in everybody has their own individual relationship with God, whether they be a Hindu or a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian. And I suppose it's my relationship with God that determines what I do. And I suppose the piece of scripture that I follow is, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. And if we look
basically a good Christian.
Yes, well, I suppose it's about being a good person. And if you look at the painting, Michelangelo's great painting behind the altar in the Sistine Chapel, it's on the Last Judgment. And when we die, we're not going to be judged on how many prayers we said, how many times we went to Mass. We're actually going to be judged in the next world on how we looked after our fellow man, and that's actually what motivates me.
So that's basically what you're saying. You're doing good deeds for people. You're not looking into it as a policy or as a strategy or anything like that. Just people are contacting you, and you're doing the best you can to help them.
Yes.
Now, what advice would you give to other people out there that are in the media as well? Some may have very strong agendas. You know, this thing of left and right, I find that very hard to understand sometimes, and I find that very hard to understand, the difference between left and right, and it just blows my mind sometimes. I do find that hard to understand sometimes, and sometimes it contradicts itself. But other people getting on the boat and jumping on the same bandwagon, what would you say to them, Anna?
Well, to be very honest with you, I don't really concern myself with what other people are doing. I try to keep the focus completely on myself and on what I'm doing. And at the end
that's fair enough, and that's a good thing, and you are doing that, and you are doing some good. But like, would you not be afraid, and would you have any advice for these other people, that they may be coming in with a very strong agenda of their own, and they may be leading people astray with their opinions and their ideas?
Well, the way
I don't know what I'm getting at. You know what I'm getting at.
I know exactly what you're trying to say. I know exactly what you're trying to say. That
you could be too left or too right.
Yes,
you know?
and there are people,
and you will have following for that, and it could be dangerous.
Yes, and I feel that the people that are, yes, there is a great danger that people will be led astray. And I suppose I did a post last week on Facebook. I'm a former history teacher, and I suppose the one thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. And I see huge parallels now between what's happening in Ireland and what happened in the run-up to the French Revolution. I suppose the French Revolution, people immediately think of Marie Antoinette when she saw the people at the gates of the palace. You know, why are they there? They're looking for bread. Oh, well, if they have no bread, let them eat cake. And as a history teacher, I would have always said to my students that in a society, there is a point where the gap between rich and poor becomes so wide that all hell breaks loose. Revolutions are started by people who have nothing left to lose. And I'm seeing in Ireland today, I'm quite alarmed at the growing number of people that are being pushed to the margins. But
is that any different than any other time?
Yes, it is. It's quite different. It's quite different from a decade ago. Now our young people are being pushed to the margins. For the first time in the history of Ireland, we have a generation of young people that will end up worse off than their parents. We are moving from a nation of owner-occupiers to a nation of landlord-renters. Young people... Again,
following that is a very European kind of a module as well. And it seemingly works in those places, but it's been forced upon us here, as you know.
Well, you see, the thing about it is this. It's a model that works in Europe because it's controlled. It's controlled for the general good of people, but in Ireland it's not. It's a model that's there to facilitate and enrich a landlord class. And our young people are working longer and harder for less money. They don't know what it is to have a permanent job. And if we follow through on that, in another 30 years from now, we're going to have a generation of people who will be retiring or due to retire, who will own nothing, and they will be expected to pay high rents. So we're building up huge problems for the future. This week, the chairperson of the National Treasury Management Agency appeared before an Oireachtas committee and reminded us that the national debt now stands at €205 billion, that we've paid €60 billion interest in the last 10 years. And that is a debt that our children are going to inherit. And of course, they're going to inherit the legacy of climate change and live with the adverse effects of climate change.
And if there's a downturn, we have nowhere to go, we're bust.
Well, it's not if. There is actually going to be a downturn, because he said there's 100% certainty that there is actually going to be a downturn.
It's very scary.
So what you actually have then throughout history is a boom bust cycle, and we're going through a boom, and it is 100% certainty.
What you were going to say is we don't learn from it.
We don't learn from it. And getting back to your point then about people to the left, people to the right, when that happens, there's huge uncertainty then in society, and people are kind of running around like headless chickens, looking to this person, looking to that person, and they actually were the conditions that propelled Hitler to power. And there's huge parallels now across Europe in 2019 with what happened in Europe in the early 1930s that brought a number of fascist leaders to power, Mussolini, Hitler and Franco. And there is a huge danger that the same thing is going to happen again. History is about to repeat itself. So yes, I would be concerned about people that are very neo-fascist in their leanings. But I think we in Ireland are unique in that the Irish people are by nature very philosophical. We're a small nation. We're closer to each other. And I am very, very hopeful for the signs that I'm seeing that there are a lot of people now who are thinking deeply about the state of our country, and they are actually coming up with alternatives that are workable. And I suppose if I just mention my TV series, Taste the Pure Drop, it's available on YouTube. It's a 4-part documentary where I travel down the River Shannon with the Flame of St. Bridget. It's a 7-day journey, and I talk to people along the way. Each day I had 4 or 5 people in conversation, and these were 4 or 5 random people that sat down and had a conversation, and it was amazing what came out of those conversations. And they were people that I hadn't met before, a lot of them, but they're very solution orientated. And I think that I suppose again a lesson that we learn from history, if we look at the Renaissance, at that time in the 1500s, people looked back to their glorious Roman past, and it kind of propelled them into, I suppose, a desire to build a new country. And we had the Renaissance and Michelangelo, whom I've mentioned, and all of that. And in Ireland, we had our golden age during the early Christian period, which was during the Dark Ages in Europe, where rulers from countries came over to Ireland to study. And we had the monasteries, and they were all completely self-sufficient. And I think that if we use that model of having local sustainable communities where all our food, all our energy and everything is produced at a local level, that it actually is the solution to a lot of what is actually happening now, that every local community will be responsible for their needs. So it's kind of moving away. In the last 20 years there has been a huge drive towards centralising everything. I think we're going to have to now take a new route and decentralise.
Okay, Anna, I'm very conscious of our time. We weren't to go over 20 minutes, and time flies when when we're having fun. So if I were to say to you, and I was to give you the camera and say to say, Anna, with your knowledge of wealth and your interesting take on history, seeing history repeating itself and the boom bust thing and everything like that, if I were to give you 60 seconds just to have a little word, a shout out to the people of Ireland, what would you say to them?
I believe that we are at a crossroads in Irish history, and it's time to have a conversation around the kind of Ireland that we want for our children and grandchildren. And I want to be part of that conversation. In fact, I want to be able to provide the forum to allow people to have that conversation. I'd welcome very much if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's available on the link below.
Well done, Anna. Thank you. You know what? We tried to keep it within 20 minutes. I'm sure we've gone over that, but you know, talking about our society today and all that's going on in our country today, we could go down several rabbit burrows, couldn't we, really?
Yes.
But I enjoyed talking to you. It was absolutely great. You're a wealth of knowledge, and you're doing great work. You might say you're not doing great work, but you're doing great work. You're obviously hit a nerve in our society. You're doing something very well, and keep it up. Thank you very much for talking to us on Irish Web TV.
Thanks very much, Anya, for having me.
Thank you.